Go on. I'm sorry.
No worries. No, yeah, they had their first practice of being back in Texas. They had I wouldn't really call it a scrimmage. It was just a normal practice, but they did. They opened up the indoor facility and had a whole bunch of people in to watch it, and it was fun. It was cool to see.
David, I know the first round of cuts happened and some IR things happened. Nothing really big though. Were there any surprises there for you?
Probably. I don't know if I'd call it a surprise, but it is interesting to note Reggie Robinson was the injured reserve. If you follow the draft, he was a 4th round pick out of Tulsa last year, a guy that a lot of people were excited about. His career really hasn't been able to get off the ground. They switched his position about 3 times in the last year. He was buried on the corner depth chart this year, and now he's on injured reserve. If you go to injured reserve during training camp, your season's over. So, it sucks for him. If you're a 4th round pick, people kind of expect you to contribute early, but it looks like it's going to be at least year 3 for him before he gets another chance to do that. So it's disappointing.
David, what were your thoughts on what you saw last Friday against Arizona?
My main thought is always just, how do you get out of the game with the injury situation? And as good as things went against Pittsburgh, it was that bad against Arizona. You lose your starting 3 technique and Neville Gallimore for at least the first month and a half of the season. Had a few other guys go down. Most of those don't seem as serious. But Sean McCune, again, is a tight end that, I think is going to make it. So that's a guy that might not be available for the first couple weeks. Other than that, I was really encouraged by some of the depth play, particularly in the second half. My LSU guy, Jabril Cox, continues to fly around when they give him opportunities in the second half of these games. Some of the young defensive linemen, Quentin Bohanna and Oso Digizua, Bradley Anai. So it's been fun to see, a lot of these guys haven't gotten opportunity because this is such a veteran-laden team. But it looked like they were putting their best foot forward on Friday.
How did they deal with the loss of Neville Gallimore?
I just mentioned Osa, and I think that's going to be option A. Actually, it's funny to think Osa was actually drafted higher than Neville Gallimore. Everybody's super high on Neville. Understandably, he's been off to a great start this year. But Osa was taken with a higher pick, so he's clearly plenty talented all of his own. And if he handles himself well these next 2 weeks, there's a chance he could be a rookie starter for week 1. So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, there's a few other options as well. Carlos Watkins and Brent Urban can do the job if they need to. But I expect the Cowboys to give Osa Odigizua a shot to try to be a rookie starter.
David Hellman with us, DallasCowboys.com. I've seen some, I guess you could say threads, posts, tweets, whatever, on Amari Cooper having a chance to visit with many people, I guess, with you, the media, today, and trying to open up a little bit about himself. What was your takeaway if you were a part of that?
I love talking to Amari Cooper, man. He's an interesting guy. And, yeah, I was there, and he can be a tough nut to crack sometimes. He described himself today as introverted, which is definitely true. And, he's not just dying to put himself out there, but if you ask him the right questions, he'll give you some good stuff. And he did that today. It was just a really interesting conversation about people's personality types. Football players are often expected to be these loud, brash, confident, trash-talking guys, and a lot of them are. But, there's 2,000 players in the NFL, and not everybody's going to fit into that box. I think Amari Cooper is definitely one of those guys, and I just think he had a lot of interesting stuff to say about, perception not being reality and not judging books by its cover. So it was a really interesting conversation about just the way that he carried himself and his demeanor.
He's deep, David. He is a deep, deep thinker on the level.
Incredibly.
He could be one of those guys that if you told me he spent time just meditating in the desert in the off season, be like, yeah, that makes sense. It works for him because he he reads voraciously, chess, like all these things that you don't. Again, he doesn't check the normal wide receiver boxes at all.
If I could have one wish as a journalist, or maybe not one, but very high on the list of my wishes as a journalist would be to get the all access treatment with Amari Cooper, where I get to spend a week with him and really break it down and come away with something. Because I said this earlier, like I don't want to talk to him about football. I'd rather talk to him about anything else, because I bet he'd have a bunch of interesting stuff to say. But we only get 15 minutes a week with these guys, and obviously they get paid a lot of money to play football. So you got to do what you got to do. But man, I'd love to just talk to Amari Cooper about life sometime.
I know that the Cowboys had a couple wide receivers get banged up, but on the back end of that, does that mean that maybe Semi Fehoko gets some more looks as we get in here in these last couple games? Because I know they liked what they saw out of a couple of those guys, but does he get maybe more looks now and a better chance to make the roster?
I think he's already getting plenty of looks, but yeah, Malik Turner injured his foot. I think it's turf toe, to be specific, on Friday. That was, again, they had 4 or 5 guys get hurt in that game. And I think, Malik Turner is probably Semi's primary competition for the 6th receiver job. I think Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown are very safe in their job status, and they should be, in my opinion. But, if they're going to keep a 6th receiver, I think it probably comes down to Fehoko and Turner. I think Turner's the more versatile guy. I think he's got more special value. Fehoko is obviously a draft pick. He's 6'4". He's very fast. He's got very rare traits that make him valuable. So I think this is a big opportunity for Semi, for sure. If Turner's not available, that's more reps that he's going to get, more chances to show what he can do. And, this could be a really big opportunity for him to grab hold of that last spot on the depth chart.
David, is there anybody that in all training camps and eventually a preseason game or two that kind of gets a lot of attention, a lot of times a Cinderella story or whatever, but anyone that you may have seen early on that you thought might be able to stick but is starting to fade or perhaps won't be able to?
Oh, that's a great question. And it definitely, it happens every year. It's always a guy that comes on super strong and, he kind of wilts when the lights come on in the preseason games, or maybe he just can't sustain it for 20 some odd practices. I'm trying to think of, nobody really jumps to my mind. Honestly, for a second, I thought it was going to be Malik Turner, because he was having this great camp. And then in the Hall of Fame game, he fumbled against Pittsburgh, but he was actually, he was able to bounce back and play a lot better after that mistake. And then he still managed to show up in practices. Honestly, we already talked about him. Reggie Robinson was a guy where for 2 or 3 weeks, I was sitting there thinking, I was like, okay, this guy was a 4th round pick. So, they don't want to cut him, but it's hard not to notice that he is absolutely buried on this depth chart right now. And so, that mystery's kind of been solved with him going to IR. It's not something you have to worry about. But I will say, for much of the last 2 weeks, I've been thinking to myself, front offices don't like cutting 4th round picks, but I was having a hard time seeing how he was going to make the roster. So that situation makes a lot more sense now.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
David
guys.
Hellman, DallasCowboys.com, some insight on Amari Cooper, about the practice. And they did that again with the video of practice, which started with Mike McCarthy. They showed cut-ups or cutaways of coaches on the sideline or players who were not playing as things were going on, and that's fine. To each his own.
Just saw a bummer